Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. For this video, I'm doing something a little different than usual. As you can see, I've got Blender open instead of Unity. And I thought it would be fun to do a little time lapse of me creating the champion Blitzcrank from the game League of Legends while talking about my process, what I've learned, and a couple plans I have for the future. Now, before I get started, I just want to say that I am not the original creator of Blitzcrank, and I'm just doing this for fun and to practice my 3D model. Now, I've been using Blender on and off for several years now, but I would still consider myself a beginner in 3D modeling, and that's something I'd like to change. And the best way to get better at 3D modeling is to practice. So one plan I have for my channel is to release regular 3D modeling content, whether it's a time lapse like this video or tips and tricks I find along the way. Now, like I said in my last video, the reason why I'm modeling Blitzcrank is to have an asset to use in my new series on creating RTS or MOBA type games. Now, when I was first getting started with creating this model, there were two things I was thinking about. The first was that I wanted to practice and get better at 3D modeling, and the second was to have a 3D asset to use inside of Unity that resembled the same low poly style as League of Legends. Now, the main issue that I had while creating this model, and you'll see it in the time lapse, is that I was a bit confused on whether I should create a low poly model to use in Unity, or if I should get more practice by creating a higher detailed model that resembled my reference. Because of this, I spent most of my time modeling Blitzcrank's body. It clearly has the most interesting shape of the character design. It's almost more organic looking than the rest of his appendages. So figuring out how to create his body was honestly the biggest challenge. And this is where things already started to get a little derailed when wanting to create a low poly model. I was using the subdivide modifier to get that more rounded shape, but ultimately I think it just added too much geometry to the body. I think the main reason why I ran into a problem in creating a low poly model that resembles what you find in the game is that I was using this higher detailed concept art for reference. And if you compare this concept art to what you might actually see in the game, they're totally different. When creating this torso, I went through several trial and errors in order to create the shape. I started with cubes that I rounded into spheres, but that didn't seem to work, so I used a sphere that I turned on its side. And the top of the bottom of the sphere is where the arms come out. The other things to note about the shape of his torso is that he's got these two rounded sections. The first one's more concave where his head comes out, and the bottom one's more convex where his chest opens up. Adding these two shapes to a sphere was a bit challenging. I ended up just extruding out a couple faces, creating that edge loop, which I then rounded out to their shapes. Now, once I got the torso to where I thought it looked like the reference, I then started working on his appendages. Now, his head, arms, and legs are definitely more mechanical looking than his body. His body, of course, is mechanical. Like I said, definitely felt like modeling something that was more organic. So with his appendages being more squared off or cylindrical, they were a lot easier to create in a low poly fashion. The arms, I basically just started out with a low poly cylinder that I then extruded out into the different levels, kind of like a birthday cake. The shoulders were a cube that I kind of rounded off on top. For the hands, he's got this solid knuckle section, which I was able to make out of a cube, and then the fingers were just made out of two separate cubes. When modeling Blitz, I was thinking about how I wanted to rig and animate him. With robots, you really don't want to have any distortion in the joints like you would with a human or something that's more organic. And so his fingers and his elbow, different parts of his body are sectioned off as separate models, as separate geometry, where each section will have full weight painted to each joint. And it is kind of funny with how much time I spent on the body, and the body ended up becoming higher poly than I wanted it to be. Once I got to the arms and the legs, I was kind of just done with it. I know the reference model has a lot more detail, especially in the legs and the feet. And this is where, like I said, I was a bit confused. I was kind of done after modeling the body, that I was just like, I'm just going to block these out, super simple. You could also say that I was a bit intimidated by his appendages, all the little detail that's there, especially in his legs. His legs are quite complex compared to what I did. And as well, the different tubes that are all over his body, which I did not include. Now, in terms of Blender features or modeling techniques that I used, there was nothing really super advanced. First was subdividing my models, which is something that I really hadn't done a lot of in the past. The second is using the mirror modifier, which is something that I do all the time, and everybody uses the mirror modifier when modeling something that's symmetrical. And the third feature that I use that's a bit newer to me is bevel. Now, I know how to bevel an edge, but using Control-Shift-B to bevel a vertice was something that I hadn't really done in the past. Other than these three things, it was pretty much the same standard techniques that we always use in modeling: move, rotate, scale, edge loop cuts, and extrude. And that's pretty much everything that I have for the process of creating Blitzcrank. And so I'll just let the rest of this time lapse play. And so stick to the end so you can see what it looks like. Now this model definitely isn't perfect, nor is it finished, but I had a lot of fun making it, and I can already see where I can improve on for my next pass. Now if you're into 3D modeling, game development, or you just want to follow along as I get better at this stuff, make sure that you subscribe to my channel so you can be up to date whenever I publish new videos.